So I just started sketching for Chris the negative space of his ad. So beyond understanding the negative space, where's your confusion, Chris?
What do I actually sketch out?
What do you actually sketch out? All right. All right. And Suzanne, you raised your hand as confusion.
Yeah, because like when I started mine, I tried to do it as simple as I can, and I usually find it because it was hard to get past doing the details.
Right.
So I was like, it's pretty much the same issues, like what exactly do we?
What do we want?
Yeah.
Okay. Can I use your ad? One of your ads? Not that
Any
one.
of these
That's a complex one. Don't make it hard on me. All right. Let me show you a few things with the ads. So these are Crystal's ads that she pulled. And here's one. High fashion. Can you see it? Actually, Ben, in the back, can you see anything of this ad?
Oh, no.
No.
You're looking at him?
Aren't you, Ben?
Yeah, I'm Ben.
Okay. Okay, so can you see anything of this ad?
Yeah, I can see like the negative space and he has like.
What do you see? Describe it.
Hat. It almost looks like food or something.
So tell me so describe what you see. You see something stacked on top,
Yeah.
which you think is a hat.
Yeah.
And how does it define stacking? What defines the stacking?
It just looks like layered.
Dark layers,
Dark layers.
dark edge. Okay, and then because it's a person's shape and it's on the head, it seems like it's a hat, right? And does the body stand out much for you at all?
Yeah, there's the shape at the bottom, like the.
Okay, so the little poof out of the bottom of the dress. Okay. This is a very monochromatic looking ad. I'm thinking, like, Michael in the back, can you see much?
It's hard to see the distinction between the bottom layer, like the dress, between the background.
Okay, the background is hard to distinguish from the figure in the foreground, correct?
The bottom of it.
Okay. That's because it's a very monochromatic ad. It's a very similar value. It's all these light tones. There's very few darks in it. And there's little spots all over it, right? In the back, Michael? Yeah, those are flies, bees, actually not flies, bees. And that's about all you could see. So if you were sketching this thing, you'd probably draw the little black spots, which are bees, and you'd probably draw the dark stacking, and maybe the hard dark shadows on the elbows that are sticking out of the figure, but there's not a whole lot more that's going to differentiate itself from the background, because that creamy dress, which is a really soft yellow, is not that different of a value from the creamy grayish white background. So it's a hard one to draw. This one, for example, has, if you look at the darks and lights of this ad, it probably shows you some dark horizontal lines of an ottoman. It has a big vertical band here because we're peeking through a doorway. It has an angle here defined by the edge, which is actually the welting of a fabric, and another edge right here of the welting of a fabric like a sofa or ottoman. And the ad, if it's an ad, is really about wondering what's going on in there, because you see part of a female body, and then you see these dark shoes. So you really, when you draw these, what do you draw? You draw exactly what you see, not what you think you see. So, I forgot your name, Stephanie, right? Stephanie, can I have your sketches? Would that be okay for you? Oh, they're digital, right?
Yeah.
Do you have, oh, and all your stuff is digital. Okay, forget that then. You're off the hook because you didn't want to show it. Okay. What I was going to say is, when you see something, for example, me. Here's my arm, it's dark. What's behind me is the gray screen. What's below me probably is the light gray screen below me. I can't see your perspective. And then I'm holding something that has a rectangular edge to it, but in the big scheme of it, you're really drawing angles and negative spaces. And by drawing the negative space, this space and that space above my arm, that will make my arm take shape. So for example, you have to do 6 little thumbnail sketches in black and white. I'm noticing that a lot of you are doing the same. If I were you, I'd be so frustrated, I'd be cursing me. I notice a lot of you, some of you have already submitted your work, and I notice that your sketches are the exact same composition with the same outline of the shape. In other words, I'm holding up a hand with 5 fingers, therefore you're going to draw a hand with 5 fingers. If you draw my hand like this, maybe you're going to draw 4 fingers because you think my hand has 4 fingers, but you're not really looking. And you probably can't really see my hand, but maybe you can see my black nail polish. Maybe. I don't know what you're able to view, but the point is look at the negative space and draw literally what you see. So on one hand it says create an abstraction, yes, which means don't put in the detail, don't put in the gradient tints, don't put in the soft tonal stuff. Just go for the hard darks and lights. Focus on the angles of things. Like, Chris, can I use that eye ad that you had? Like, Chris has an ad here with an eye, and if you look at it, I'm going to hold it up here. If you look at it, the first thing about this ad composition is there's something in the center, there's something breaking the center, and it's weighted down here. But then there's this angular geometric shape down here which defines this field of blue, which is kind of askew. And then the black, that's also kind of askew. And then it's interrupted by this oval shape here. So start breaking things down into a variety of different ways of looking at it. For example, draw this sketch in black and white with your little pencil thumbnail of everything that's black in it, nothing else. Then draw it in terms of everything that is blue in it, let's say. Then draw it in terms of only the outline of shapes. So fill in everything else that has color, and everything that's white, don't fill in. And see what happens. My guess is because this has color in the water drop edge, you'll have white here, black line, all the rest is white. Play with it. You're going to start to create an abstraction by what you do or don't include when you draw it. Don't look and say, oh, it's an eye, and immediately all of you are going to do this. Oh, it's an eye. So immediately you get out your pen, you draw an eye, you put a pupil in the center, and it's an eye, and you add eyelashes because they have them. But that's really not what's there. It's really not. There's a pupil here, and we all know our pupils are black and they're round and they're smack in the center of our eye, but this one has a pupil and then it has a big white spot next to it blanking out that big black circle of the pupil. So literally draw what you see. And it's going to make a far more interesting composition than you drawing what you think you see, like the eye. Does that help you? Does that clarify anything? Very hard to describe. You just have to get out that pencil and start drawing. Don't draw outline shapes, draw darks and lights. Fill them in with your pencil. So if your sketches are outline of exactly the same thing and you sat there thinking, can't believe she made me do 6 identical things, figure out how to focus on different elements to make your little 6 sketches separate, different. That was it. Okay, that helped a little bit.
Yeah, it did. And like it seems like I kind of got it from where I was going. So
Then you're good.
yeah.
Any more questions about this? We're going to critique these on Wednesday. And my suggestion is that after you've sketched them as thumbnails in darks and lights again, then take the 2 ads that you like the best. Make 3 larger versions in color. Base it off your abstractions. Then take what you like and go digital. And my experience with digital is put it all in there, draw all the darks and lights and shapes that you want to put in there, and then it's kind of like turning them on and turning them off, or filling them with color, or filling them with a weird color. Like, just put them all in there first, and then you can fill them with nothing, or you can fill them with different colors, and then you can start to play, and that's when you start to create an abstraction from the composition. You had a question?
Oh, I was just gonna ask about the total amount of thumbnails. I know you want 6 per ad.
Yeah.
But I have like 5 ads that I'm not gonna end up using, and I've got 6 for those. But the ads I did end up using, I sort of got the hang of it. So my sketches, I have to have 6.
You're an
for-
overachiever. You do a lot. I tell you numbers because most people don't do enough. Okay? That's my truth. And so if you want to meet the criteria at the minimum, you need 6 thumbnail sketches of 3 ads. Find 2 of those ads you like, 3 larger color ones, like larger just a little bit. Do in color of those 2 ads, and then take digital what you want. And you might take digital both ads and see what you like better. Because after you start working on one, you might go, this is fun or this is not fun.
Okay.
Okay? And that's my criteria. I don't count unless you're just scraping by. If you're just scraping by and you want to meet the criteria, then I count. If that's the question. Does that help you with the criteria, how I grade stuff? If you're not, if I'm looking and I'm thinking, okay, this was okay, you sat down, it was 10 o'clock at night, so at 11, okay, you did 45 minutes of work and crammed everything in there you could, then I'm counting. You probably should have this assignment. This is a 40-hour assignment. We've had this for 2 weeks already. It's a good 40-hour assignment. If you don't have 40 hours in it, then you're probably not capturing the essence of it. Or some of you might have 40 hours just in figuring out how to work in Illustrator, and I appreciate your pain. Okay? Some of you, the software is new, and I know there's a lot of time involved in gathering the software. Are there more questions about this? It's hard to talk about in the abstract. I know I showed you all the examples. I did, by the way, post this weekend more examples for you. I posted this last night. For example, this one. I think I pulled this student's work up for you. I know it's hard for me to describe it. And what this student did right here with his sketches is not correct. This is a student who said, oh, look, there's a woman and a child, and they're picking produce. And he's a beautiful illustrator. Here, Chris, thank you. He's a beautiful illustrator, and he was way too specific in his drawing. And he showed it to me. And same here. He said, here's a couple. They've got a bowl of fresh produce or fruits or vegetables, and here they are. And he gave me a drawing, which is not what we're looking for. We're looking for the positive, negative. And this is getting better. You don't know how to draw those thumbnail sketches? He focused on different aspects of the ad, and he got more abstract and more abstract. You can see it. You can see it start to take shape here. And same thing here. This is way too detailed on the right. But when he starts to focus on only darks, like in this center one, you can see it takes a different form. Does that help you understand it more? You can see, so you can see kind of the wrong, which would be way too time consuming, and more of the way that I want you to start to head on it. And these are great examples of focusing on different elements and different shapes, breaking darks and lights into different shapes. And ultimately, I think I showed you this one. And digitally, it looks far more detailed than the final execution when he printed it, because the final execution when he printed it really looked like the one in the center. You saw eyes on a dark wall, and then the bowl of food, the oval shape, and the legs. And it made it a far more dramatic image. And you can see how detailed he was. It was very hard for the student to break away from the detail. But ultimately, when it printed like this one here on the bottom. And you couldn't see when it printed out all those subtle tones. I don't know if you see it on the screen. There's subtle tones here, but when it printed, all of this print is black. So all you would see is all of this was black, and you just see the leg, you just see the eyes, that little spot on the head, and the bowl down here. That's all you could see. And it was quite extraordinary. But what's important to keep in mind is the complete composition. Do not, like Chris's ad that had the eye up here and had a logo and type down below, take the entire page, and the entire page is part of your composition. And the reason that's important is, as designers, you'll find that we'll put graphic elements in our photos or graphic elements in our shading or color that might take your eye right to the product and take your eye right to the logo. There's directional guides as a designer. They don't look like an arrow saying buy this product, but subtly it's going to take your eye to what they want you to consider the most important. So there's, and then again I posted this one for you, which was a very complex one as well. I don't think this one seems to be downloading. I'll fix it. But anyway, that should help you. Okay? Do we still have more questions on those? All right. All right, so Wednesday, please bring your ad and a print of your ad. So they will be exactly the same size. Your ad, let's say, is 8.5 by 11. Your print's 8.5 by 11. Your ad is a tabloid wide, then your print is a tabloid wide. Okay, everybody's clear about that? Any other questions I can try and address or confusion? Okay. Remember, focus on what you don't really see. So if it's a person who's the central focus of your ad, focus on the space around the person. And by focusing on the negative space, that'll define the positive. Okay. Then what I'd like to do is just look ahead to the semester. Right now, you have your texture project. Let me view this in student mode. There we go. Right now, you should have started, hopefully on the weekend, focusing on the texture assignment. What I'd like to do today is go over the texture assignment with you so you can get started on it. And then I would like to introduce this interactive Calder exercise so you can get started on the Calder work. And then hopefully you'll have a lot of lab time. Okay? Are there any questions? All right. And then notice next week that we're going to start our midterm projects, which actually I'm going to ask you on Wednesday what you'd like to do your midterm on. So I might as well get more specific about the midterm today actually as well. So let's go back to the texture project up here and this assignment and what it's about. Whoops, I didn't want the lecture, I wanted the assignment. Here we go. Okay, so this texture project, for example, the texture project is all about, I know I touched on this earlier, it's all about exploring textures in your environment that you can create in order to build a texture library for you to work with to enhance and elevate your designs. And there's two ways you're going to grab your textures. One is handmade and the other is digital. Handmade textures will come from something like rubbings. Let me click on this one. You might be able to see it. And let me click on this one. And this one. And this one. Let's get started. So your textures can be digital. You can use a camera to capture a texture, and you can create textures digitally by working in Photoshop and playing with all the filters. So you can manufacture textures. And the other would be creating textures on your own. So this student is extremely organized. They numbered all of their photographs of their textures that they found. They went out in the world, they took snapshots, they collected them into their photo library, they grabbed textures, and then what they did was they took a texture like the photograph of grass, they went into Photoshop and documented how they played with filters. They converted their texture to grayscale, they converted it to RGB, they played with a sepia neon glow, and that's the result they got. So they created a wide variety of textures from their photographs and documented what they did. And the advantage of that is it lets you explore the tools in Photoshop for creating textures. It lets you use textures that you found on your own. They're your original textures. And then understand how you can manipulate them in order to create a new digital effect. And you can see, by following this, you can see the beautiful things they do. And it's a beautiful documentation. So I encourage you to be as type A about documenting this as possible. And then this student's an artist, so had a full set of paints in their studio where they poured paints, blew paints through straws, splattered paints with a paintbrush, wet a paper towel and dropped ink drops on it. You know, use your imagination, whatever feels authentic to you for creating your handmade textures. Your handmade textures, Suzanne this morning said she didn't understand textures, and I had her put her foot on the desk and I took it up side of a pencil and paper and rubbed the bottom of her shoe because it's got a cool texture on it. Textures are everywhere. I also recommend that you document them because they're going to be fun. And then consider your subject matter. Again, what do you want to say? What's the focus of what you wish to communicate? The focus of what you want to communicate for this assignment is not texture. The focus of what you want to communicate is what you have to say for the semester. What's your message? So if your message is all about people versus nature, then perhaps you want to create a photo or a portrait of a woman holding a cat, or a woman smelling a rose in the garden. But you're going to create that by whatever form you want, whether it's in Photoshop or Illustrator, whether you have a found image that you steal and you redraw, you know, shapes from the image, however you wish to do it. But what you're going to start to do is build this image through using your textures. So this student ended up drawing a female figure, a female face. And here's her sketch. And what she did was she then took her sketch, I think she went into Illustrator, it says Illustrator, and she drew this shape right here. You can all figure out how to draw that shape. And if you did the type tool exercise where you put a photo in your type and you masked it, that's how it's created. Each shape has a different texture in it, and then a clipping mask was applied in Illustrator. And you've already done that through your type exercise, yeah? Nod, yes, I remember. Okay, thank you. All right, and she thought she was done. She looked at it, she says, okay, I did it. I put my textures in there. I have handmade textures. I have digital textures. I'm done. And yeah, it's attractive. It's interesting, but it's not extraordinary. And so then she considered how she could elevate it. So then she started to take her illustration now, opened it in Photoshop, took her Illustrator file, which had her masked textures, opened it in Photoshop, and then since she'd played with those filters, she thought, heck, let me play with those filters a little more in Photoshop with my composite drawing, which she did here. And then it was really kind of washed out looking and still not very exciting, and what do you got to say, and that's not a very complex person. And then she took it to a new level by layering some of her handmade textures and her found textures layer on layer in Photoshop and played with layer blending modes and the filters. And you can see the different effects that she got as she tried them until she ultimately came up with this final composition. Setting it against a background, adding the textures, it's got handmade and digital. She clearly used layer blending for that intensity of color. It's probably like color burn, or it's a layer blending mode that you get to play with in Photoshop. Take a layer, there's a pull down menu for blending modes. And if you don't know how to find that, again, remember all of these assignments have a Q&A. So texture assignment Q&A right here. Blending textures in Photoshop, here's a video on how to do that. Blending images in Photoshop, how to do that. Creating clipping masks in Illustrator, how to do that. How to create clipping masks in a different version of Illustrator. All your tools are right here. Layer blending modes in Photoshop. Let's see, that's not a video. this shows you normal layer blending mode in Photoshop. This is what happens if you dissolve it. This is what happens if you take this sphere and that background and multiply it. That's the screen blending mode. There's tutorials for you here, but you have to rely on your resources. I can demo this, but you don't want it, I don't want everybody to look the same. You have to explore your own tools. And if you set up an image on one layer and a graphic on another layer or a texture on another layer, and you tried all your layer blending modes, you get your effect, right? So all these resources are right here for you. Let's come back to here. And then what she did ultimately is you're going to create 2 texture quilts in InDesign. You're going to take a 12-inch by 12-inch box, unless these are 4x4. It's either 12 by 12 or 16 by 16. I don't remember what my specifics are. And you're going to create a box in InDesign for each of your textures and place your texture in the boxes. And you're going to have one set of textures which are handmade, and you're going to have a second set of textures which are digital, which are the ones above here. There they are, digital. And those are called your texture quilts. So it's a 3-part project. 1/3 of your final presentation is your digital texture quilt. The next part of your presentation is your handmade texture quilt. And the 3rd part of your presentation will be your final composition, your composite composition. And different people document their textures differently. This student, for example, made color notes for themselves. Your textures are not 3x3 or 4x4. They are a large piece of paper or large file, and this is just a small little preview of that texture. Okay, and this student's concept was focusing on the human skull, the human head. Who did skull in here? Was it, who did the skull? Was it Cassandra? Yeah. So Cassandra, here's an example of the skull, her way of looking at the human head. And then she kind of did mind mapping with her textures, which came out very elegant. She decided to take the skull, break it up into different portions, and then she drew it, outlined it, I think, in Illustrator, and then made clipping masks for each of the sections. And the only thing this is beautiful documentation of the process. The only thing I'd rather see is also the Illustrator window, so I see the whole software application. But great narrative throughout here, and here's her final presentation. And she's stuck with a very limited color palette. So you can recolor your textures. You could do, for example, a hand rubbing and have it presented in any variety of colors. You can recolor them, you can digitally alter your textures, whether they're handmade or digital, and you can layer them all. You can also make this an abstract if that appeals to you. And this student knew they wanted to do textures, they wanted to create a safari, I think something on the Serengeti or something like that. And so they did some research and considered their composition and then mapped it all out. They were super, super detailed about it and kept track of it. And I like seeing this process because I can see it accumulate. I can see as you work and the way you worked. You know, look at the difference by adding these cast shadows onto the backgrounds, how it enhances the design. And then they worked with their color palettes by experimenting with color balance and vibrance and brightness, just by sliding the slider bar under hue or saturation or color. And here's their texture library and their final presentation. So what you have right here, down here, is a video on how to build a texture quilt in InDesign. And what I said here is, and I'm going to let you look through all of these. I mean, there's beautiful examples down here. I think we opened this one already. I thought we had. And for those of you who don't draw, Nothing says that you have to draw your own original work. You can always use resources out in the on the internet for maybe grabbing a vector graphic that you might want to fill with a texture. But here's some digital textures and handmade textures. And then the brainstorming that she wanted to do with her owls and her sketches. And this was her process as she was learning to play with her sketches. And look at how different creating just this owl standing alone without any foundation or depth to it. Look at how it changes so dramatically when you take that same owl and give it an environment. It creates an entire mood. I mean, just look at the difference. So consider how you're presenting your work and what makes it have a sense of polish or finish. This student had created, I think, a collage of their trip to New York. And they ended up creating a poster, a vinyl poster. It was huge. And when you're in, by the way, Acrobat Professional, you can create these little sticky notes just like that on your PDF file. So after you've exported your PDF file, in Acrobat Professional, they have this add a sticky note right here. You click on it, you click on where you want to put the sticky note, and then you just type your note. Neato, right? And so these are handmade textures, digital textures, probably that he took himself. And then here was his collage he had created a long time ago about a trip to New York. And then he wanted to build that same collage with his textures. So he started to break it down with these different elements, found images. This might be a time where, yeah, you might want to live trace this face. So you break it down to its simplest components and put a texture in it and add it to part of your collage. And look at how rich this looks because of the layering of textures and by altering the vibrancy of colors, how it enhances it. You know, you could take the Statue of Liberty's silhouette, fill it with a texture, duplicate it in Photoshop, change the color value, duplicate it and shrink it down in Photoshop, change the color value, step and repeat, step and repeat, step and repeat, right? Or look at how these buildings take shape just by the darks and the lights, creating edges on them. And that's just drawing a rectangle and then perhaps creating a transparent color on top of it to create the illusion of the building shape. When you are in InDesign, I suggest in order to make a texture quilt, it's really simple. What I recommend that you do, I'm noticing a lot of you are putting together your PDF files like your process in one enormous document. So I'll have a page that might be 36 inches wide by 60 inches tall because you put all your stuff on one page. You can use many different pages for your process. You don't have to make such a huge page because then all your pages keep changing size on my laptop when I'm grading your work, and it's hard for me to see a 6-foot tall page on my computer. So when you're in InDesign for building your quilts, what I recommend that you do is you make a new document in InDesign. I make the document 12 inches wide by 12 inches tall. I would make, let's say, 4 columns, no gutters, not facing pages, and no margins. Margin 0. And you're going to end up with a document that looks like this, right? You've got your 4 columns there, right, like that. You can drag a ruler guide right here at the 3-inch mark in InDesign. And I can right now create a box that's 3 inches by 3 inches. And there's something called step and repeat in InDesign to make this go really fast for you. You can go to Edit, with that box active, step and repeat. I'm going to repeat it 3 times horizontally, vertical 0. Horizontally, I want it to repeat every 3 inches 3 times. If I click preview, look what happens. Now I have all my boxes. And now if I select all these boxes in InDesign, they're all active. I go back to step and repeat, and I want to repeat them 3 times, and I don't want to repeat them horizontally, so horizontally 0, but I want to repeat them 3 times vertically. I mean every 3 inches vertically, and not horizontally. So horizontally 0, and look at what I'm getting. And now I've got 16 textures. And then all I have to do is click on one, go to File, Place, locate my textures. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 textures. So let me choose 8 boxes. I think this might work. If I choose 8 boxes, I'm not sure. We're testing, okay? Could be wrong. And I place, desktop, 8 textures, select one, hold my shift key down, select them all, open, let's see if they all place in my 8 boxes. Maybe.
You
No.
have to click on each box.
No. Sometimes they pop in, but they didn't. I can just click on each one though. Loaded all 8 textures, and now I placed them all. That was fast though, right? I'm not doing this to torture you guys, right? Here's fast. That was fast. It's accumulating will take you a while. Building them will take you a while. But if you look, and I'm in my white arrow, and I select this texture, you can see this texture is huge. And you can move this texture around the box, but the idea is to have large textures to work with. Okay, does everybody understand how to make the texture quilt? The other thing is you go to the page panel, and you can, let me hit undo. Undo. There we go. And I can duplicate this page. So I went to Window Pages, open the page panel, and I hold my Option key down, and I can duplicate that texture quilt box. Now I've got 2. Right? That was pretty simple. So now I've got all my texture quilts ready. So one of these will be the digital, and one of these will be the handmade ones. And then how you save this, of course, in InDesign, and now I can add additional pages. You know, my process might be me just adding more pages. My final composition, let's say my last page is my final composition. Maybe my final composition is a very wide poster, and it's 3 feet by 12 inches. So I can go to the Page tool on page 4, go to my Page tool, I get these weird corners, and I can now change this page to 36 inches wide by 12 high, and notice that I can have a different size document in my InDesign file. Everybody good with that?
Mhm.
All right. I know I've shown you this, but I figure you might have forgotten. So that's how you build the texture quilt. Anybody got questions about that? No? Okay. Anybody got questions about the texture project? Yeah, Sherry.
I think you said last week that we probably can't use our cell phone cameras.
Yeah, the quality is not very good, and I appreciate you bringing that up. What I'd like to show you is this. When you find a file on the internet, whoops, I did not want that. When you find a file on the internet and you steal somebody else's textures, instead of stealing textures, type high resolution texture library. And let me quit Lightroom right here. Suzanne's favorite, right, Suzanne?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because they did new presentations in the catalogs.
Yes. I'd like to show you what this assignment is all about back here, which has to do with the resolution in your cell phone. You think I'm digressing, but I'm really not. I'm right on track.
I know you know what you're doing.
Maybe. Well, don't know that I know what I'm doing. You have an exercise right here called image size and resolution, and the entire purpose of this exercise is to show you what the true resolution is of your photos when you work with them. And when you take a cell phone photo, some of you might have high resolution cell phone photos, some of you might not. When you steal photos from the internet, you're probably stealing them at 72 pixels per inch. So for example, I typed earlier before you came in the room, I typed a high resolution texture library, all right? And I went actually to this one. Now, and then what I did was I clicked on them, and I'd rather you take your own textures because I think it's more engaging. I think you'll find more fun stuff. And so I went to the texture library. It tells you the size of the file. So let me take, I like this one, Mosaic, Cracked Mosaics. And this is this should be high resolution. So I took this and I stole it off the internet. I clicked and I dragged it onto my desktop. Those were the textures I picked. So now if I go to Photoshop and I open that texture, the last one I found, File Open, this is what that exercise is about. The exercise, I know I'm jumping around, but stay with me here. The exercise says, locate a high-resolution royalty-free image on the web and download it and open it in Photoshop. That's what I'm doing right now. And you're going to upload the image, and you're going to tell me the website you got it from, the file format you downloaded it in, the size of the image based on the pixels, plus the dimension of the image at 72 pixels per inch in inches, and the dimension of the image when you change that to 300 pixels per inch. And it says to change the resolution in Photoshop, go to Image, Image Size, uncheck Resample, which means don't add more pixels that already exist. Use it at the size you received it at. And then type in the resolution you want, which is 300 or 72 if you have to go backwards. And Photoshop will interpolate the image to the correct dimensions. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going to Photoshop. I downloaded the image. I downloaded the mosaic tiles. I'm opening it in Photoshop. We think it's 1.6 megabytes when it's a JPEG image. Notice it's a JPEG image. I open it. And when I view it in image size in Photoshop, I ended up downloading an image that was 72 pixels per inch. It downloaded compressed at 1.5 megabytes, compressed as a JPEG. When I decompress it, it now is 14 megabytes. It's 35.5 inches wide, 26.5 inches high, at a low pixel resolution of 72. That's the screen display. If I uncheck Resample and I change this to 300 pixels per inch, my 36-inch image becomes an 8-inch image. And the height that was, do we remember?
No, 26.
26, thank you, is now 6 inches. And that's what I want for that assignment. That's what the assignment is, to tell me all this information. When you upload your image, you would upload it as a JPEG. And don't upload an image that's too big. I just want you to understand, if I chose to resample this image, watch what happens. We now know the integrity of this image when it's not compressed is 14 megabytes. If I resample it and I put it back to its 36 inches, it was 35.5? About, so we'll leave it at 36. Notice it went from 14 megabytes to 250 megabytes. I didn't gather more details to this photo. The photo was what it was when I downloaded it. What I'm doing now is called interpolation. I'm faking it out. I'm faking out pixels that weren't there before. And so the software is kind of guessing what should go there to make a higher resolution image, but I'm not going to get more detail ever in it. It's just a fake out. So you don't want to interpolate up to increase the size. It doesn't matter if you eliminate pixels, but adding pixels and faking it out doesn't make for a better image. Does everybody comprehend that? All right. So I'm going to cancel that. And what I would do for this image, for example, is go back to image size. All the work you should have should be not resampled, and should all be at 300 pixels per inch. And it should be a pretty sizable document. This is still a little small right here. But let me show you something. Let's say I've got, so this is 8 inches wide. In Photoshop, I think I did show you this. Let's say I want my canvas size to be bigger. I'm going to put this image in the upper left corner, and let's say I want my canvas to be 17 inches wide by 13 inches tall. I can use my magic wand, and I can select everything that's white here, and I can, remember I showed you this before, I can fill this with the Content Aware tool. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Which was magic. And it's going to fill in with all the rest of my canvas. So hopefully it should fill in with my mosaic and emulate my artwork. There's other ways to do this. Also, learning how to use the rubber stamp tool so you don't get a hard edge or a seam showing up in your artwork, which looks kind of tacky. Learning how to use the rubber stamp tool is really advantageous. Sorry, this is a big file. That's why it's taking so long, because it's high resolution. Yeah,
Can you show us how to use filters?
you bet. I'd love to. Filters are fun. Filters are fun. Let me finish this one up.
So basically we need to, if we don't have one already, locate a real camera.
You do not need to take photos. You could do all of your handmade stuff and scan them. And all your digital, you could just start with digital off the internet.
Okay.
So, nope, you don't. And actually, if you look at this, I'm hitting Command D to deselect this. That's not too bad, really, for how it filled in. I don't have any really hard seams, right? Now, what I can do, let me just show you layer blending modes if you're not familiar with it. So let me go find another texture, let's say. Let me find cracking paint texture and open it. And I'm going to hit Command A to select all. I'm going to hit Command C to copy it. Everybody's familiar with that. I'm going to close it up, and I'm just going to paste it. And when you're in Photoshop, when you paste, let me show you the layers panel. Right here, it's open already. Here's the layers panel. When you're in Photoshop, you have a background layer. My recommendation to you is always, if you want to keep something sacred, keep the background layer, drag it to the layers panel, a new layer here, make a new layer, and turn that one off. It's locked, and you've always got your original layer to work with. And now I have that other image that I copied in the other photo, and I'm going to paste it, and notice it pastes as a new layer. Now, if you look at layer blending modes, which are fun to play with, this is the normal layer blending mode. I can change the opacity right here of that layer that's active, so it's see-through, transparent. I can play with layer blending modes to see what happens. Multiply means what sits on top of the other one overprints it. So now you hardly see those little marks from this thing. You could do color burn. You just play with it. And you try to decide the effect that you're getting using these different layer blending modes. They all have a different purpose. They all create a different effect. You might decide you want hard mix and you want to change the opacity. Sometimes I find I'll take the same artwork like this one, I'll duplicate that layer, and this layer blending mode might be hard mix, and this layer blending mode might be subtract, or it might be saturation or luminosity, in case I want to use the same artwork twice. The other thing I might decide, for example, let me put this on normal, is I could take this layer here that's active, increase the opacity to 100%. I can play with also image adjustments, hue and saturation. That's fun to play with. And I can change the color of the artwork that's on this layer only by changing the hue of it. And I can saturate it and pump up the color. I can increase the lightness. I can darken it, and I've got a totally different look from this version of it to that version of it. Let me go back to normal for this one. And that's just plain in Photoshop. And you turn on your layers by turning on the eye or turning off the eye, what you can see. And then you could decide, oh, I like this, but I want to make it darken everything beneath it and see if it does make a difference. You asked about filters. Let me take something that totally shows you filters in a more accurate light than these abstractions. You might also consider, when you're working with these textures, to use the eraser tool. You can increase the brush size of the eraser tool by hitting your bracket key. And my eraser opacity is right here, so it's at 100%. And I'm erasing this edge. Remember, I've got that same artwork below right here. And that's how I can create a soft edge. I can create a hard edge on my brush by increasing hardness, and look at how it erases with a hard edge. I can also say, let's say I only have those nails from over there. I can use the clone tool, and my brush size is tiny. I can bracket the brush size up to here because I want to grab that nail. I hold my Option key and click on the point of origin that I want to duplicate with my clone tool, and I can carry it over here, and I can clone that whole row using my clone tool, because it's duplicating from my point of origin on the left side. Can y'all see that? So playing with these tools is fun. Learning what you want to accomplish with it. Let's say I want to make this artwork go all the way to the top. I can click here as my point of origin, hit the Option key, and then just continue on up here. You get the idea? And that's exploring the tools. You know, there's a ton of tools here. And if you don't know the tools in Photoshop because it's unfamiliar, Google Photoshop tools. And you know there's a tutorial to tell you that, right? Let me find something that's a photo of a person. So, Eleonora, who's your favorite person?
My favorite person?
Yeah, you wanted to see filters. We're going to filter somebody you like.
I don't know. I don't have a favorite person.
Singer? Artist?
Johnny Depp.
Trinidad?
Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp.
Yeah.
Last night I saw him in a movie. Okay, let's go to Johnny Depp images. Let's pick that one. Okay, stealing a photo, right? Okay, go to Photoshop. I'm going to close this up. Don't save it. I'm going to go to Open. I'm going to locate Johnny Depp's photo, open him up in Photoshop. And again, take the background layer, drag it to the new layers so I can preserve the original photo just how it was. Now, in Photoshop, let's look at the image we captured again. Here's the original image size. It's a 14 inch by 10 inches at low resolution. I've unchecked resample, and now we look and see it high resolution. It's really a 3 inch by 2 inch photo. It's very small. So you understand when you're stealing photos off the internet, you're getting a really low resolution file. Okay? So let me come in here. Now, you asked about filters. Photoshop has an extraordinary, wonderful selection of filters. You must, when you work with filters, be in what's called RGB mode. That's where the filters give you the most options. So I would choose RGB mode. And then you can go to filter, and there's a filter gallery. That's probably the most fun place to start. And the filter gallery will take your image, and all of these are turn down arrows. So you have all these choices. And we can make this look like a watercolor by hitting paint daubs. You can increase your brush size. You can increase the sharpness in your edges, the contrast of darks and lights, and you can have it be wide and blurry, the brush, or have sparkle, little highlights of sparkle on the edges, or light rough surface like the paper, or you can make it look like it's been painted on a canvas or a watercolor, and you can increase your shadow intensity or your brush detail or what type of paper you have for it. Here's more filters, sprayed strokes. It's just as simple. There's no magic to it. You can turn it into sketch mode, which becomes chalk or charcoal. You can turn it to look like a halftone pattern, like old-fashioned cartoon comic books. Somebody in here does comic book kind of art. I forgot who it was. Who's doing comic book?
It's Jaylene. She's not here.
Oh, she just walked out. There you go. Okay. Or like a Sumi ink pen, Japanese ink pen. And you play with the filters. And what you might decide is that you go to something that's super contrasty like that. Let's say you decide you chose the stamp in Photoshop and you say, okay, here's Johnny Depp. And then maybe what you decide to do is decide that all this area, you use the magic wand tool right here, and then you take the selection lasso, hold your shift key down, and deselect everything that isn't the background of that area. It's just everything in this little hat area for Johnny Depp. And what you might choose to do, for example, is, oh, I did that wrong. So let me deselect this. I'm holding my option key down. I'm deselecting all of that area. So the only thing that's selected is this white area here. You can also save your selection to use later. So I'm in select and I'm into save selection. So I'll call that left corner so I know what I'm working with. Oops. And I'm going to show you what I mean. And then I'm going to paste that texture that we had right here. Remember that texture? I had copied that. Here's my texture. So I've pasted it right up here. Now, for example, I can go to selection, load selection. Remember the left corner selection I saved? I'm on the layer with this texture. I've got the left corner selection, and right now it's active. And right down here in Photoshop, I can add a layer mask to it, and it just plunked that texture right. I know, Sherry's so excited. I plunked that texture right behind Johnny Depp. So you can start to break apart your artwork and build your textures like that. I can take this texture layer right here, and I can apply a color to that layer by going to adjustments, and let's try color balance. And I can adjust maybe the highlights of this and see what happens if I change the color balance of it and play with that. Right? So Photoshop's fun to play in. You can start to build your files however you want. There's so many filters to work with. Usually when you start to work with the texture files, the more you layer something, the more dimension it has, instead of just having its own little compartment for something.
Could you take that left corner and then do like the right corner and that middle piece and put them all together so
Yeah.
when you're changing the back, it's
Yeah.
happening all at once?
I'm hitting undo.
But you don't have to. I'm just asking if that's a possibility.
Well, I am. And Photoshop has one level of undo, but they have a history panel. And I can go all the way back here to the magic wand selection for my level of undo. So I've gone way back here to that. I'm going to close my history panel. And I can also go to, I'm going to hit deselect. I can go to select, and I can go to color range, and I can select everything white by eyedropping white, and it's now selecting everything white in my artwork. So that's everything that's not purple. I could do it the other way also. And so Sherry's question, can I deselect everything except for the background? So I'm going to hold my Option key down, which gives me a minus sign for my lasso tool. So I'm deselecting all of this, everything down below. I'm deselecting all these wine bottles. I'm deselecting here. And I'm deselecting his t-shirt and what I think is the edge of a hat, right? And I end my lasso tool right at the beginning where I started. And so now what I've got selected is everything on top that you asked about. And I'm going to save my selection. I don't need to save it, but now that I've done this, I'm going to save it. I'm just going to call it background. And again, I'm going to paste, let me find a busier texture.
So that would be the best way to do that instead of selecting the 3 different pieces separately and
I
combining
can't
them?
because they all, if you follow the white connects to all kinds of different things. The white isn't compartmentalized, so that was really kind of one of the ways to do it. And let me pick whatever texture this is. Here's blue paint. So I'll select all, Command A, copy it, Command C, close the window, Command W, paste that blue on top of here, and go to my selection, load the selection of the top, right? Background, there it is, and mask. Go to this mask right here, the bottom, add layer mask, and it applies, and it put in the texture. Does that get you there?
Very cool.
And then the other thing is I could, you know, what you might decide is in the background, you might let this show through, and you might decide that this one and this one both multiply. And they create this deeper saturation and texture going on with that original photo. And maybe you decide this purple one isn't looking so hot, and you decide to do something soft light to it to change the effect. It's starting to take a whole different look. I mean, obviously you're stealing a photo. I'd rather you create something of your own instead of stealing images, but this might be the way to go. Yes, Suzanne?
Well, something that you mentioned about, like, that you mentioned the white parts are not compartmentalized. If you used the color channel in one of the red or yellows, you could actually manage to get all that part where Johnny Depp and the wine bottles get all black and then just the background white, where it is compartmentalized.
So here's Johnny Depp. You want this one instead?
Well, no, you can make a layer kind of like that, except that the whiter is more compartmentalized, and then you could actually make a masking layer
Of it,
of
yes.
it,
Yeah.
and they're together. And I guess I should show it. If you
Do you want to show it?
Well, if
I could.
Why don't you demo it? Come on up. Because I'm not sure I know what you're describing.
Okay. I would. Can I find a new photo that has more contrast? Or
No,
just
let's
use
just work with this.
Okay. Do you mind if I delete that?
So she dragged it to the trash to delete it,
Okay.
and it deletes the layer.
Okay. And I don't want.
And she doesn't want to see the top layer, so she's going to turn off the eye, and she's active on the background layer. But what I recommend is she makes a new layer out of the background layer by dragging it to the layer, new layer mode, because you always want to keep the integrity of your original layer.
Okay. It's been a while actually since I've actually used this.
And what are you trying to do now?
That we're going to go to the channel layer.
So she's going to something called a channel layer.
Yeah, it's
So-
color channel.
So you want to go to Window Channels
Yeah,
or Color Channel.
the color channel
So go to Window,
window.
Window,
Mhm.
Channels.
Channel.
Is that what you want?
Yeah, because you're gonna make a path, and then you're gonna use this. But
So she's trying to select one of the darks and the lights from breaking the colors, the red, green, blue colors apart separately. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, and then you make this, and then
Wait, you make this. You made
make
a
a
layer
layer
out
of
of the
the-
channel,
Yeah, and then you actually don't let this be seen.
and then you hide the other
Well,
channels.
I'm gonna actually start over because I think this layer is actually messing me up. So I'm gonna actually delete that. I'm going to hide that.
You gotta talk really loud, because you're talking to the whole class right now.
Okay, I deleted the first layer because it's actually messing me up because it's tracing through the channel layer. And if you're gonna create a mask, you're gonna have to have it well defined.
So she
Mask.
defined her darks and lights by picking one of the layers, which would be either red or green or blue in what's called a channel layer. You're getting pretty sophisticated here.
Yeah, like I learned that in Brooks.
Yeah.
That you make these channel layers, and then with this one,
Yes.
you turn off all the other colors, and you
Right.
just have a blue layer.
Okay.
Then you go to go to adjustments, and you go to color curves, and then you actually blow it up to where it's just black and whites, and then you get this section right here where Johnny Depp and the bottles are to a pure black or the closest black you can. And
Okay.
then
I'm going to have you stop here because I think you've lost everybody. Okay. So what I'm going to have you do is this is your midterm.
this is my midterm.
This is your midterm, and so you can be prepared with it on the first day of midterms.
Alright.
Okay? Because then you'll have time to be sure what you're doing, and then you can seamlessly show us it. How's that? But what I really wanted to introduce to you here is ways to select things in Photoshop and select different colors, you know, and how to build your compositions and work with layers. Let's see, I've lost track of this now. So I was showing you filters. Did you get to see filters, Eleonora?
Yeah.
Okay, not so confusing, right? You just play with them, right? And start working with your image adjustment tools here to see what happens. Posterization is super cool in Photoshop. It diminishes your image to its simplest color levels. So actually, now I'm on channel layers, so I want to get rid of channel layers. I realize now I'm in a lot of trouble here. So I'm going to stay in red, green, blue. I'm going to open my layers panel so you can see where I'm at. I'm going to work on my copy right here. I'm going to select my whole image. And if you play with these things like posterize, you can see what it does, how it reduces the level of color values in your image. Go to its simplest form. And these are fun things to start to work with. It's ways to start to break down an image which might make it interesting. Now, for example, if Johnny Depp became your subject matter, for example, you might decide that you don't really want to just steal this photo. What you might want to do is have a photo taken of you, Eleonora, at the table with your arm extended out like Johnny Depp's arm on the right-hand side of the page, and you might want to have you and Johnny Depp having a couple of beers together, right?
Yeah.
And that's when stealing Johnny Depp's photo and you putting it side by side with him would be a fun way to steal a photo. Not just taking his photo and using it, but trying to emulate the situation, take the exact same photo and see how you can blend them together and then create something that means something to you, right? You'd like to have a beer with Johnny Depp, right?
Oh yeah, of course I did.
Yeah, me too. Okay. Anything else I can demo regarding, let's come back to this. Anything else I can demo regarding this assignment's super clear about resolution. I don't think that's a hard one. Anything else I can demo about the texture assignment for starters or how to explain what you're looking for?
How many of our textures do we need to use in our final product?
However many is appropriate.
Okay.
You have to use both digital and both handmade, but whatever you think enhances your image best. You don't need all 32.
Okay.
Any other questions about the texture project? And obviously, you know, look at these examples. They're wonderful. They can be very abstract. They can be things that are meaningful. And all of you will approach them a different way. This student loves to journal, grabbed all their textures. and wanted to recreate the Boston album, and look at all those layers they've got. I see 23. I see 112. Yeah. Fun, right? Okay. How many of you would like to just start working on these projects, or would like me to introduce interactivity? Who would like me to introduce interactivity for exercises? Whose brain is like saturated to the max? Alrighty. All right. Wednesday, I'm introducing interactivity right before we critique the real to abstract assignment. Okay, so Wednesday